Hey guys, this is Animedesu and this recap of Failure Framed Season 1. Everyone thought he was a weak orphan in a new world with E-rank skills, but he takes revenge on everyone by destroying them. Mimo was a troubled kid who got abused in his own house by his mother's new boyfriend after his father's death. The poor kid got beaten up every day while getting barely anything to eat. As he cowered in the corner, covering himself, his horrible mother watched television, ignoring his shouts of pain. He ended up growing up to be a lonely kid who was weak and didn't have any confidence. He wakes up from a nightmare of getting beaten up by his stepfather when he hears the bully of his class, named Sho, messing with a nice girl named Ya. He takes away her book and waves it around in the air, making fun of her for reading girly novels because this negative imbecile can't understand that a girl will read girly novels. Mimo imagines how, in a TV show, he would stop the bullying and win everyone's admiration, but he knows that in reality, no one on the bus cares. If he stands up for her, his weak frame will only get him beaten up. Most popular students support Sho, while the others laugh along to avoid being targeted. The teacher is useless, asleep, as Sho relentlessly demands the girl's phone number. Before he realizes it, Mimo stands up, looking Sho in the eye, and tells him to leave Ya alone. Sho laughs, calling him a sissy and weak, when suddenly Kiri, the most popular guy in class, tells Sho to give the book back. Sho obeys and returns the book to the girl, then moves on to bully another nerd, Yasu. Mimo questions why he stood up for Ya, an unusual act for him, but before he can dwell on it, everyone on the bus is transported to a different world. They are all utterly bewildered as they stand in a completely unknown place while a hot goddess stands atop a bridge and introduces herself as the goddess Vizai. She explains that every time the threat of a demon king appears, the kingdom of Alan summons brave warriors from a different world to defend their kingdom. 200 years ago, the demon king almost demolished their entire kingdom, but thanks to some heroes, the demon king was soundly defeated, and the entire demon army was destroyed. Unfortunately, the Demon King has been resurrected, which is why they have all been teleported to this world to fight as the new heroes who will put an end to the Demon King. The students are utterly confused as they wonder whether they are dead or if it is some kind of prank. Their teacher tells them to stay quiet and instructs them to hear what the goddess has to say. Mimo looks at the old architecture, the soldiers wearing armor and holding spears, and the goddess with the golden eyes before pinching himself to check if he is dreaming. Kiri ends up speaking and asks the goddess what will happen if they don't cooperate with her, to which the goddess smiles and claims that she won't be able to send them back to their world. Kiri asks whether there really is a way to go back, and Vizai replies that there is a reverse summoning ritual which can send them back, but to get that, they will have to kill the Demon King, as they will require a special part called the Evil Element, which will only drop if he dies. Sho screams at her for calling them to a new world without giving them a choice and refuses to help, but Vizai goes down on one knee and begs them to help save her kingdom from destruction. Ya speaks up and tells the goddess that they are just humans who can't really do anything, but Vizai promises that they have abilities that they had no idea about. Sho still thinks that all of this is a joke, so Vizai decides to prove it and calls forth a prisoner of war and a giant demon dog. She lets the giant demon dog loose, and it immediately lunges at the prisoner before killing him. Some of the girls are horrified at this and fall to their knees while Vizai looks at the demon before chanting a spell and completely blasting the monster into flames, removing it from existence. She calls the students forward and tells them that they are going to measure their latent abilities one by one. All the students walk up to a crystal ball and check their abilities as it glows in different colors. After the nerds were through, Sho walks up to the crystal, and as soon as he puts his hand over it, it starts glowing a bright red color. The goddess looks happy and claims that he has a rank skills. Finally, Kiri goes ahead, but as soon as he puts his hand over the ball, it starts glowing a bright golden before exploding. After that, Ya heads up, and even she turns out to be a rank. After some more students, another girl walks up who turns out to be a rank. The guards are completely shocked as Vizai explains that even one A-rank individual is considered extremely lucky, but to have 3 A-ranked people is unreal. Finally, Mimo walks up to the crystal, but when he puts his hand over the ball, it starts glowing a dim purple color. The goddess doesn't even give him a second thought and tells the next person to come up. Mimo tries to ask what rank he is, but she completely ignores him, so he walks away, realizing that even in this world he is going to stay a background character. After that, Yasu, the nerd, walks over to the crystal, who turns out to have a special dark ability inside of him which another dark hero possessed a while ago and became the strongest. Finally, everyone checks their stats as the goddess tells them that they also have a personal ability which varies from person to person before telling them that they have to perform a critical ritual now. She calls Mimo to the front, and he is immediately pushed by a guard. She sends him below in a dark pit and claims that Mimo is E-ranked, which is the lowest in the entire class. Historically, E-ranked people have caused a lot of trouble, so they are usually killed. But since this time they got so many amazing heroes, she will give the E-ranker a chance to save his life, and he will be sent to the Abandoned Ruins, which is a dungeon far away where criminals and monsters are sent. She tells him that if he manages to survive, they will leave him alone and he will get the right to live, otherwise he can kiss his life goodbye. Mimo tries to argue, claiming that he can get better. But the goddess replies that he falls into the category of failure frame, which means that his stats are so low that even after training his ass off, he cannot get better. He gets pissed off and tells the goddess that he never chose to come here, he was summoned against his will and now is being disposed of. But Kiri cuts him off and tells him that he is wasting everyone's time as the girls are already tired while everyone agreed with him. Mimo falls to the ground defeated when Yasu walks up to him. Mimo remembers the time when he helped Yasu after he got bullied, but Yasu rejects him and tells him that an E-ranker should talk with more respect to their superiors. Mimo loses all hope as the goddess commences the ritual and throws a leather bag as his special item, which is completely useless. Ya tries to defend Mimo by saying that this is wrong. Frustrated beyond belief, he raises his arm and uses the paralyze spell at the goddess, who easily manages to block it before calling Mimo a loser for even trying to hit her with his E-rank skills.
廃棄勇者では儀式を始めましょう。召喚時勇者にはユニークアイテムが真剣な革袋があなたの言うだけです。待ってください。宝石にマスを流し込める君はクラスメイトなんですよ。何無礼なこと。ますぐ彼を解放して。仕方ありません。さあ皆様、たちの世界で言えば負け。あなたたちは勝ち組の側です。
Kiri also tries his spell, which creates a huge fireball, as he claims that he was just checking by letting a small amount of mana in the spell. Everyone laughs at the power difference between a loser like Mimo and themselves, while Mimo simply puts his head down as tears fall down his cheeks. He remembers how his younger self used to cry when suddenly his soul tells him to stop acting like a good person and show them the true nature of his heart, the nature that he has been trying to repress for so long. Mimo finally lets it all go as he looks up with hate-filled eyes and tells the goddess that she is a rotten hoe and warns her to be ready for him if he ever comes back alive. He immediately gets transported into a dark cave where he tries to open his status but fails because of the low light. He pours some mana into the leather bag and the gem starts glowing, which he uses as a lantern as he moves through the cave. Suddenly he realizes that he has been walking on skeletons, which scares him. He wonders what could have killed all these people when a monster tries to attack him, which he barely dodges and starts running away. The monster starts chasing him while Mimo runs with all his might, thinking whether he should turn around and fight, but his heart knows that the level difference is so great that he will simply die the moment he stops. He starts crying out of fear and gets knocked to the ground because of a rock jutting out of the floor. He turns around to see his death in its face while frustration over his life takes command of his body. Just as the monster was about to kill him, Mimo ends up trying a last-ditch effort to save his life and shoots the paralyze spell, which, to his surprise, actually petrifies the monster in place. He immediately gets up and starts running away, but soon he reaches the end of the cave, where another bird demon walks up to him with the raw intent of killing him. Mimo immediately raises his arm once again and uses the paralyze spell, which again freezes the enemy. He realizes that it wasn't a fluke and his spell actually works, but he starts feeling tired, so he opens his stats and notices that his mana was almost completely gone. He realizes that he has another skill left, so he tries to cast a poison spell on the monster, which works very well as the demon starts turning black and bleeding from its body. Mimo sits down on the cave floor, wondering why his spells are being so effective against these demons, when suddenly he hears something behind him. He turns around to see that the Minotaur demon has managed to break off the spell and is ready to land the killing blow on Mimo. But this time, instead of running away, all the hatred for everyone who treated him badly comes back to him. Even after being completely depleted, he raises his arms towards the demon, determined that from now on he will kill to live his life, and challenges the demon to fight him, not knowing whether he will survive this time or not. He attempts to use Paralyze on the Minotaur again, but this time the skill fails to activate, so Momori has to jump out of the way. He is informed by the system that he is not allowed to cast the same effect multiple times on a single target. So he comes up with a new plan and casts Sleep on the Minotaur, causing it to fall to the ground unconscious. Once the monster is out cold, Momori applies poison to it as well. It looks like there are no restrictions on stacking effects, but he is out of mana. If he keeps using his skills, he will eventually burn through his stamina as well, and there are still a lot more monsters for him to deal with. Momori begins spamming paralysis, and eventually he has managed to stop all the monsters but has left himself on the verge of collapse. However, his troubles aren't over yet, as even more monsters begin to approach. So he has no choice but to keep using Paralyze until his body can't take it anymore. It's not long before he reaches his limit and can't go on. There are still a lot of monsters around him, but he knows if he tries to use his skill even one more time, it could mean the end for him. He has no other options available, but luckily, just as he's about to use up the last of his body's stamina, the cockatrice that he poisoned a while ago suddenly dies. Due to this, Min's level shoots up until he's at level 258, and both his mana and stamina are replenished. Mamori doesn't understand what happened at first, but then he notices the dead monster and realizes that he must have gained experience because his poison killed it. With his energy replenished, he can keep fighting as much as necessary. As he continues to spam paralysis, his skill levels up, leading him to believe he can upgrade it by repeated use. But he will worry about that later, since for now, he has to make sure he can escape this place alive. With his paralysis now at level 2, Mamori notices that he now has the option to select multiple targets at once. So he does so, and the monsters are all immediately frozen in place. He begins inflicting poison on all the paralyzed monsters, and eventually his poison skill levels up as well. But there are still a lot more monsters here, so that means he can level up even more. Mamori takes a look at his status window, and since he leveled up, his stats are far higher than they were when he first got here, especially his mana, which is now over 8,000. Mana is his only way of surviving this hellhole. Mamori takes a break and sits down while he waits for the poison to do its thing. Eventually, the monsters begin dying one by one, raising Mamori's level even further. By the time he is level 500, Mamori is fairly confident that he can now make it out of the ruins. So, he prepares to take care of the remaining monsters. However, after seeing Mamori kill dozens of them with ease, the monsters have enough common sense to know that they shouldn't mess with him, so they all run off. Now that the area is safe, Mamori sifts through the piles of rotting bones in order to find any loot that he could use. After getting his hands on a cloak and a blade, he sets off to escape the ruins. As he looks for the exit, he comes across many different monsters, but he has realized that he faces another problem: he has no food. So, he's going to starve soon if he doesn't get something to eat. So after retracing his steps, he returns to the monster corpses and reluctantly begins carving into them to eat what he can. However, as the eyeball pops out and Mamori tries to eat it, he realizes that the monster's entire body has acid in it, so he won't be able to eat it after all. With no source of food, Mamori believes he will starve to death before he ever makes it out of here. He has no energy left in his body, but then he notices the color of his magic bag changing. Since that's the only source of light he has, he frantically rushes over to supply it with more mana. However, as he does so, he feels something appear inside the bag. To his delight, he finds a bag of beef jerky and a bottle of soda. He excitedly begins eating. While this means his hunger problem is solved for now, he doesn't know for sure if he will be able to get the bag to produce food again. As days continue to pass inside the ruins, Mamori has gotten used to committing mass monster genocide with his skills. But he is worried that he might be losing his humanity because of this. After suffering abuse at the hands of his stepfather, Mamori was on the verge of having his murderous villain arc right then and there. But before he could lose his sense of humanity, he was rescued by his aunt and uncle, who took him in and gave him a sense of normalcy. He learned empathy from them, and he thought he had become a normal person like them. But right now, as he is staring at the mountain of corpses beneath his feet, he feels nothing at all. There's no going back to how he was before, so Mamori just accepts that he's a psychopath now and moves on. As he goes, he comes across another section of the ruins with a floating eyeball monster, but Mamori just takes it out with his poison. As he moves forward, he comes across a door with a magic lock, and upon opening it, he finds a small room with 2 skeletons inside. He assumes they must have been people that were disposed of by Vicious as well, but weren't fortunate enough to make it out alive. He searches through their things and finds a pouch full of gems, so while he feels bad about stealing from the dead, the gems could be valuable, and he could use them once he gets out of here, so he no longer feels bad about it. He goes through the other rooms nearby as well, and eventually he comes across one that takes a large amount of mana to open, but once he finally unlocks it, he finds a skeleton sitting with a note next to it. The note says that the skeleton was once a man known as Angan, the Great Sage, and he was the former hero of darkness, the same one Vicious had mentioned was the strongest of them all. According to Angan's note, Vicious sent him here by force after she no longer had a need for him as a hero. And while he was powerful enough to make it this far, he clearly couldn't escape. So he left a message to help the next person who could manage to make it this far. Vicious may have said the Demon Lord was evil, but she is just as bad in Mamori's eye, although he can't say he is much better than her either, since his only goal is to get revenge on her, and he doesn't care if he has to destroy the world to do it. As he is looting Angan's corpse, he comes across a book of forbidden arts. It is full of information about recipes for medicine and magic tool instructions that could prove to be useful later, so he decides to keep it. He also finds a scroll of forbidden magic, but he doesn't understand what it says. However, if a great sage like Angen went through all the trouble of keeping it hidden with him up until his final moments, then it must be really powerful. It may even be strong enough for Momori to eventually defeat the goddess if he's ever able to decipher it. Momori continues making his way through the ruins until he comes across a door that he thinks will lead to the surface. However, if this is truly the final door, then that must mean the Soul Eater Angen was talking about is here as well. Momori remains cautious of his surroundings and takes a look at his stats to make sure he is prepared for this. He did all he could to ensure he leveled up as much as possible before he got here, so he can only hope that his skills are enough to defeat it. Momori eventually finds a creepy face, and he is certain that this must be the Soul Eater, so he immediately attempts to use Paralyze on it. But the moment he steps out of cover, the Soul Eater fires a laser at him. This is the first time anything has managed to stop him from using his skill, and Momori has to think fast. Since the only way out is to use the gem on his forehead to activate his skill, he needs to say it out loud and be within a certain distance. But none of that matters if the Soul Eater can attack him before he finishes casting the spell. While Momori is still thinking about what to do, the Soul Eater breaks out of the wall to go after him. So, he really has no choice but to fight now.
おそらく俺が攻撃の意思を持った。どうする？脱出にはあの状態異常付与の発動にはスキル目だが殺すための難度は高い。それもある程度の声量が必要。どうすればいい？スキルは発動できない。って来やがったのか。生存率をゼロたらしめているそう。だからこれはきっと最後の生存競争になる。
Meanwhile, outside the ruins, a girl is trying to escape from her pursuers and decides to hide nearby, not knowing the fierce battle is taking place inside. As the Soul Eater slowly approaches Momori, he wonders why it hasn't fired its lasers at him yet. But he soon finds out why as the Soul Eater spits up some purple gunk which takes the form of humans. These are the souls of the people the Soul Eater has killed, and they are being forced to attack Momori, so he is forced to paralyze them. However, he can't bring himself to use poison because they are still human, even if they've become gross globs of paste. The Soul Eater enjoys watching as Momori struggles because he can't attack the souls for moral reasons, and he can't attack the Soul Eater either because it would react too fast. Momori begins breaking down and crying a lot because he says he doesn't want to hurt other people. And he's losing aura by the minute with his constant crime. But as the Soul Eater is reveling in Momori's tears, he reveals that it was all an act. As he paralyzes the Soul Eater, he knew he could never land a successful paralyze on the Soul Eater unless he managed to get it to lower its guard. So now that the Soul Eater is paralyzed, Momori doesn't really care what happens to the souls. If he kills the Soul Eater, and even though he spent so much time trying to become a harmless, law-abiding citizen, all he cares about are the facts. Those soul puppets were trying to kill him, so they could be babies for all he cares. He's still going to poison them anyway. The Soul Eater struggles to move out of frustration that it lost to Momori, and this lets Momori know that powerful monsters can try to overcome his paralysis, but it does additional damage to their bodies. That's interesting and all, but he doesn't want to waste any more time here. So, he casts poison on the Soul Eater and destroys it once and for all. Upon doing so, the souls that the Soul Eater consumed are released, and they all appear in front of Momori to thank him for freeing them. They've been rooting for him as he tried to survive the ruins, and none of them really mind the fact that he looted their bodies either. Momori is then approached by Angen, and he has only one thing to say: he wants Momori to take down the goddess and avenge them all. The souls of the dead pass on after that, and while Momori normally wouldn't accept the request without some sort of compensation, he was already planning on taking her down anyway. Now that the final monster has been defeated, Momori can open the door and begin his quest for revenge on the surface. This is the end of Failure Frame Episode 2. Thank you so much for staying on this channel and watching our videos. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel so we can keep you updated with our latest content. See you in the next video.